The year was 2347, and humanity had been part of the Galactic Council for 42 years. They were the youngest species in the Alliance, and every other race looked down on them. The elder races had ruled the stars for thousands of years, and they saw humans as nothing more than clever animals who had stumbled into space by accident. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship called the Resolute. He was a tall man, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many battles. His hands held a data tablet, and he read the message on it for the third time. Each time he read it, his anger grew stronger. The Galactic Council had sent Directive 7749 to Earth. The message was clear and cruel. Humanity was ordered to give up all their warships. They were ordered to destroy their defense systems around Earth and all their colonies. They were ordered to move 60% of their people to labor camps on the outer rim of the galaxy. The Council said humans were breeding too fast and using too many resources. They said humans were a threat to peace. Commander Lisa Hayes stood next to the Admiral. She was younger than him, with short brown hair and sharp eyes. She had dedicated her whole life to serving humanity among the stars. Now she felt sick as she read the same message. "They are not even hiding it anymore," she said quietly. "They want to make us their slaves." But Morrison nodded slowly. He had spent his entire career believing that humanity could find its place among the stars through hard work and patience. Now he saw how foolish that belief had been. On Earth, Ambassador Daniel Cooper stood before the United Earth Assembly. He was a calm man who had spent 20 years building friendships with alien races. He had believed that talking and understanding could solve any problem. He had been wrong. Cooper had traveled to the Council headquarters to protest Directive 7749. He had spoken for 3 hours about human rights and dignity. He had begged the alien leaders to reconsider. The response came from a Valori representative named Zeth-Nar. The Valori were a race of beings made of living crystal. They were beautiful and ancient and completely without mercy. Zeth-Nar had laughed at Cooper. The sound was like glass breaking. "Humans should be grateful," the alien had said. "Lesser species have been completely destroyed for far less defiance than yours. We are being generous." Cooper returned to Earth with nothing. The Council had rejected every argument without discussion. They did not see humans as equals. They saw them as pests that needed to be controlled. 3 days later, the Council showed humanity exactly how serious they were. The colony world of New Haven orbited a yellow star at the edge of human space. It was a beautiful world with blue oceans and green forests. 3 million people lived there. They were farmers and teachers and children and grandparents. They had built homes and schools and hospitals. They had created a peaceful life, far from the politics of Earth. None of that mattered to the Council. A fleet of Council enforcement vessels appeared in orbit around New Haven without warning. They did not send any message. They did not give any chance to surrender. They simply opened fire. The plasma bombardment lasted for 6 hours. When it was over, there was nothing left. The oceans had boiled away. The forests had turned to ash. The cities were craters of melted glass. 3 million humans died in a single day, and the Council called it a warning. On Earth, people watched the news in horror. Parents held their children and cried. Old soldiers who had thought their fighting days were over felt cold rage building in their hearts. In every city and every town, the same question was asked. What do we do now? Some people wanted to surrender immediately. They said fighting was pointless and that humanity would be destroyed if they resisted. Others wanted to attack right away, even though they knew it would mean death. Anger and fear tore through human society like a disease. Admiral Morrison watched the footage of New Haven burning, and something inside him changed forever. He had been a soldier for 40 years, and he had always followed orders. He had always believed in the system. Now he saw that the system was designed to crush his people. He called a meeting with the highest military commanders on Earth. They gathered in a secure room deep underground. There were 12 of them, and they represented the combined military power of humanity. It was not much compared to the Council, but it was everything they had. "We cannot win a direct war," Morrison said. "They have 1,000 ships for every one of ours. They have weapons we cannot match, and technology we do not understand. If we fight them openly, they will destroy us in weeks. General Nathan Cole was the youngest person in the room. He was a large man with dark skin and calm eyes. He had studied military history his entire life, and he knew that weak forces had defeated strong ones many times before. The key was never fighting the battle your enemy expected. Then we do not fight them openly, Cole said. We make them think we have surrendered. We make them believe they have broken us. And while they are celebrating their victory, we prepare for a war they will never see coming. The other commanders nodded slowly. It was a desperate plan, but it was the only chance they had. Over the following days, the United Earth government made a public announcement. They said they would comply with Directive 7749. They said they would begin dismantling their military. They said they wanted peace at any cost. The council was pleased. They believed humans had been properly frightened into submission. They sent observers to watch the disarmament process, and the observers reported that everything was proceeding smoothly. But the observers only saw what humanity wanted them to see. In secret facilities hidden across human space, a different kind of work was happening. Scientists worked day and night on new weapons. Engineers designed new ships. Soldiers trained in hidden bases. Every human who could contribute did so. Factory workers made parts for weapons they would never see assembled. Farmers grew extra food that was quietly stockpiled. Teachers told their students to be patient and to remember New Haven. The galaxy thought humanity had been tamed. The council moved on to other matters. The Valori laughed about how easy it had been to frighten the young species. They had no idea what was coming. On the first anniversary of the New Haven massacre, the people of Earth observed a moment of silence. In that silence, 3 million names were read aloud. In that silence, humanity made a promise. The dead would be remembered. The guilty would be punished. And the galaxy would learn to fear the species it had tried to break. 6 months had passed since the burning of New Haven, and the galaxy believed humanity was finished. Human ships moved peacefully through space carrying cargo and workers. Human politicians spoke softly about cooperation. Human soldiers put away their weapons and reported for reassignment to labor colonies. Everything looked exactly the way the council wanted it to look. The alien observers sent regular reports back to their masters. The humans were broken. The humans were obedient. The humans had learned their place. These reports made the council very happy, and they stopped paying close attention to the young species. This was exactly what humanity wanted. Dr. Megan Torres was 43 years old, and she was the most brilliant scientist humanity had ever produced. She had been working on theoretical physics at a university on Earth when New Haven was destroyed. Her brother had lived on that colony with his wife and their 2 young daughters. She never saw their bodies because there were no bodies left to find. After the massacre, Megan received a secret message from General Cole. The military needed her help. They needed weapons that could defeat enemies with technology far beyond anything humans had ever built. They needed miracles. Megan moved to a hidden laboratory beneath the frozen surface of Europa. The facility was buried so deep that no scanner could detect it. 200 of the best scientists on Earth worked there in complete secrecy. They ate and slept in the lab because they could not risk being seen traveling back and forth. The work was impossibly hard. They were trying to create technology that the elder races said was impossible. They failed again and again. Equipment exploded. Experiments produced nothing useful. Some of the scientists wanted to give up. Megan refused to stop. Every night she looked at a photograph of her nieces and remembered their smiling faces. Every morning she went back to work with cold determination. After 4 months of failure, she finally had a breakthrough. Her team discovered how to weaponize quantum entanglement. They could make particles affect each other instantly across any distance. They could create weapons that would bypass any shield ever invented. They could build drives that would let ships appear anywhere in the galaxy without warning. When Megan showed her results to General Cole, his hands were shaking. "This changes everything," he said quietly. "With this, we actually have a chance." Meanwhile, the military was building an army in the shadows. Admiral Morrison coordinated the entire operation from a command center hidden inside a hollowed asteroid. Shipyards worked around the clock in locations the council would never think to look. Mining operations that were supposed to be gathering resources for the council were actually building warships. Every human freighter and cargo vessel was secretly modified. Hidden compartments held weapons. Civilian crews trained for combat during their long journeys between stars. The Council saw merchant ships. Humanity saw a hidden fleet waiting for orders. Commander Ben Parker was 31 years old, and he had been a Marine before New Haven. After the massacre, he was assigned to train civilians for ground combat. His students were teachers and doctors and office workers. They had never held weapons before. Ben worked them hard. He pushed them until they collapsed, and then he made them get up and keep going. Some of them hated him for it. He did not care. He knew that soft training would get them killed, and he had seen enough death already. One of his best students was a woman named Amy Richards. She had been a schoolteacher on Mars before the war. Her sister had lived on New Haven with 2 children. Now Amy trained 18 hours a day, and she never complained. She learned to shoot and fight and kill with the same dedication she had once used to teach mathematics. "They think we are animals," she told her fellow trainees one night. "They think we are weak and stupid and easy to control. They are going to learn how wrong they are." The Council continued to believe everything was fine. Their spies reported no unusual activity. Their analysts said humans were too primitive to be a real threat. Their leaders laughed about how easy it had been to defeat the young species. They never understood humanity at all. The elder races had ruled the galaxy for so long that they had forgotten what it was like to fight for survival. They had forgotten what desperate people could accomplish. They had forgotten that the most dangerous creature in the universe is one that has nothing left to lose. Humanity had learned something in the months since New Haven. They had learned that the galaxy did not respect kindness or fairness or reason. The galaxy only respected power, and so humanity would show them power beyond anything they had ever imagined. Ambassador Cooper continued to play his role perfectly. He smiled at alien diplomats and agreed with everything they said. He signed papers surrendering human rights. He made speeches about peace and understanding. And every night he received secret reports about the preparations for war. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. Every time he bowed to a council representative, he felt shame burning in his chest. But he knew that his acting was keeping humanity alive. Every day he bought with his words was another day for the scientists and soldiers to prepare. General Cole finalized the attack plans in the last week before the anniversary of New Haven. The operation would strike at the heart of council power. It would be fast and overwhelming and completely unexpected. There would be no warning and no mercy. On the night before the attack, Cole gathered his senior officers for a final briefing. They sat in a dark room lit only by holographic displays showing their targets. "Tomorrow we begin the war that will define our species," Cole said. "Some of us will not survive. Many of us will lose friends and family. But we will show the galaxy that humanity cannot be broken. We will show them that the price of our freedom is more than they are willing to pay." The officers saluted and went to their posts. Across human space, ships powered up their hidden weapons. Soldiers checked their equipment one final time. Scientists monitored the new technology that would give humanity its edge. Everyone knew what was at stake. At exactly midnight on the anniversary of New Haven, the first human attack ships activated their new drives and vanished into the void. The galaxy had created a monster by trying to destroy it. Now that monster was awake, and it was very angry. The elder races had wanted humanity to kneel. Instead, humanity was about to make them burn. The Council military headquarters was a massive space station, orbiting the gas giant Valar Prime. It had been there for 10,000 years, and no enemy had ever come close to threatening it. 300 warships guarded the station at all times. Defense platforms surrounded it in every direction. The commanders who worked there believed they were completely safe. They were wrong. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the Resolute as his fleet prepared to attack. Around him were 500 human warships. 6 months ago, this fleet had not existed. Now it was about to change the course of galactic history. "All ships report ready," Commander Hayes said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were burning with anticipation. She had waited a long time for this moment. Morrison nodded and gave the order. "Begin the attack." The human ships activated their quantum drives and simply vanished. One moment they were floating in empty space at the edge of a distant star system. The next moment they were inside the defense perimeter of Valar Prime. They had bypassed every patrol, and every sensor, and every weapon platform. They appeared right next to the Council headquarters, as if they had always been there. The alien commanders had no time to react. They had never seen technology like this. They had never imagined that anyone could appear inside their defenses. For precious seconds, they simply stared at their screens in disbelief. Those seconds cost them everything. Human weapons opened fire, and the Council fleet began to die. Ships that had protected the headquarters for centuries were torn apart in moments. The new quantum weapons passed through shields as if they did not exist. Explosions filled the space around Velar Prime with fire and debris. Admiral Morrison watched the destruction with grim satisfaction. This is not revenge. He broadcast on all frequencies. This is consequence. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over, the Council headquarters was a cloud of twisted metal and frozen bodies. 300 warships had been reduced to scrap. The defense platforms were silent and dark. 10,000 years of military dominance had ended in a single afternoon. News of the attack spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. Every species with access to communications watched in horror as the footage played. The primitives had done the impossible. The humans had destroyed the center of galactic military power. On the Council homeworld of Aethon, the supreme leaders gathered in emergency session. High Chancellor Vormalik was an ancient being with pale blue skin and 4 eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. He had ruled the Council for 300 years, and nothing had ever frightened him before. Now his hands were trembling. "How did this happen?" he demanded. "How did the animals develop such technology? How did they hide an entire fleet from us?" Dawn. No one had answers. The intelligence services had failed completely. The military analysts had been utterly wrong. Everything the Council believed about humanity had been a lie. While the Council leaders argued about what to do, the human offensive continued. General Cole led the ground assault on the Valori homeworld. Transport ships landed in the capital city, and human soldiers poured out with weapons ready. The Valori were not prepared for ground combat. They had relied on their fleets to protect them for thousands of years. They had no real army. Their police forces tried to resist, but they were swept aside in minutes. Commander Ben Parker led his troops through the crystal streets of the alien capital. His soldiers moved with cold efficiency. They were not there to kill civilians or destroy the city. They were there to deliver a message. Every statue that celebrated the New Haven massacre was demolished. Every government building was surrounded. Every council official was arrested and held for trial. And on every screen across Valori space, the humans broadcast footage of what had been done to 3 million innocent people. "You called the destruction of New Haven a warning," Parker said as his words reached billions of alien viewers. "Consider this ours." Amy Richards was part of the assault force. The schoolteacher from Mars had become one of the deadliest soldiers in the human military. She fought through the Valori resistance without hesitation. Every enemy she killed was payment for her sister and her nieces. When the fighting was over, she stood in the ruins of the Great Hall where Zethnar had laughed at Ambassador Cooper. The crystalline representative was now a prisoner kneeling before her with its hands bound. "You said we should be grateful," Amy said quietly. "You said you were being generous. Do you still believe that?" "No." Zethnar said nothing. For the first time in its long life, the alien understood fear. The human offensive spread across Council space like wildfire. Fleet after fleet was destroyed. World after world was captured. The elder races had never faced anything like this. They had always been the hunters. Now they were the prey. Some species tried to fight back. The military empire of the Kethrali gathered their remaining ships and launched a desperate counterattack. They believed their numbers would overwhelm the humans. They were completely wrong. Admiral Morrison met the Kethrali fleet with half their numbers and destroyed them in a single engagement. The new human weapons made the battle almost unfair. Ships that had terrorized other species for centuries were cut down like grass before a fire. After the Kethrali defeat, the other council races began to surrender. They had no hope of victory. They had no weapons that could match human technology. They could only beg for mercy from the species they had tried to enslave. Dr. Megan Torres watched the war from her laboratory on Europa. She had created the weapons that made victory possible. She had given humanity the power to destroy its enemies. But she took no pleasure in the death and destruction. "We had to do this," she told herself as she watched another council fleet burn. "They gave us no choice." It was true. The council had started this war when they burned New Haven. They had created this monster when they tried to break humanity. Now they were paying the price for their arrogance. Within 2 weeks, the council's military power was completely shattered. Their fleets were scattered or destroyed. Their headquarters was gone. Their leaders were hiding in bunkers waiting for the humans to come for them. The galaxy had learned to fear the young species from the small blue world. But humanity was not finished yet. They had won the war. Now they had to decide what kind of peace they wanted to build. The Galactic Council surrendered on the steps of their own Grand Assembly. It was a building that had stood for 15,000 years. Treaties had been signed there. Wars had been ended there. Now the leaders of a dozen species knelt before humans and begged for their lives. Admiral Morrison and Ambassador Cooper stood together watching the ceremony. They had known each other for 30 years. They had served humanity in different ways but with the same dedication. Now they faced the most important decision of their lives. "We could burn it all," Morrison said quietly. "We could destroy every species that voted against us. We have the power." Cooper nodded slowly. "Yes, we could. But then we would become exactly what they feared. We would prove that they were right to try and destroy us." The two men looked at each other and understood without words. Humanity had not fought this war to become conquerors. They had fought to survive. They had fought for justice. And now they would build something better than what had come before. The trials began immediately. Every species that had voted for Directive 7749 faced judgment. Every commander who had participated in the New Haven massacre was hunted down. Every politician who had called for human subjugation answered for their words. Humanity did not execute the guilty. They believed death was too easy an escape. High Chancellor Vormalik stood before a tribunal of human judges. His pale blue skin had turned gray with fear. His 4 eyes could not meet the faces of his accusers. He had ruled the galaxy for 300 years, and now he was just a frightened old being waiting to learn his fate. The evidence against him was overwhelming. He had personally approved Directive 7749. He had ordered the attack on New Haven. He had laughed when reports of the massacre reached him. 3 million deaths rested on his shoulders. The sentence was announced, and Vormalik began to weep. He would not be killed. Instead, he would spend the remainder of his considerable lifespan on a labor colony. He would do the exact work he had intended for humans. He would live as a slave until his body finally gave out. "You wanted this for us," the lead judge told him. "Now you will understand what you tried to create." Similar sentences were handed down across council space. The guilty were sent to work in mines and factories and farms. They would spend their remaining years doing the labor they had planned for humanity. Some of them lived for centuries. They would have a long time to think about their crimes. Dr. Megan Torres traveled to the new capital of the Galactic Union. It was built on a world that had once been a council administrative center. Human architects had designed new buildings that rose into the sky like monuments to survival. Megan stood before representatives of 100 species. Some of them had been enemies. Some had been neutral. Some had tried to help humanity in secret during the darkest days. All of them wanted to know what would happen next. "We were weak and you tried to destroy us," Megan said. Her voice was calm, but it carried the weight of everything humanity had suffered. "Now we are strong, and we offer you partnership. That is the difference between us." She explained the terms of the new compact. Humanity would share their technology freely with any species that agreed to certain conditions. They had to renounce the old council policies. They had to guarantee the rights of all sentient beings. They had to promise that no species would ever again be targeted for subjugation because it was young or different. Most species signed immediately. They had seen what human weapons could do, and they wanted access to human technology. But some refused. They could not accept being lectured by primitives. They still believed they were superior, even after everything that had happened. The Kethrali Empire launched a final desperate offensive. They gathered every ship they had left and attacked a human colony. They believed surprise would give them victory. General Cole responded with overwhelming force. The entire Kethrali fleet was destroyed in a single battle. Not one enemy ship escaped. After that, no other species dared to resist. Ambassador Cooper worked tirelessly to build the new galactic government. He had spent 20 years trying to make peace with the Council. Now he would create something better from its ruins. The new Galactic Assembly gave every species an equal voice. There were no elder races or young races. There were no masters or servants. Every world had the same rights and the same responsibilities. Humanity led by example rather than by force. Katie Sullivan became one of the youngest representatives in the Assembly. She was 24 years old. She had been a child when the Council attacked a refugee ship carrying her family. She had watched her parents die in the vacuum of space while rescue ships were turned away by Council orders. Now she spoke for humanity in the halls of power. Her voice was soft, but her words carried the strength of her people. "We do not want to rule you," she told the assembled delegates. "We do not want revenge. We want something much simpler. We want you to remember what happened when you tried to destroy us. We want you to remember that the cost of aggression is higher than you can pay. We want you to look at your children and think about their future." She paused and looked around the chamber. Hundreds of alien faces watched her with expressions ranging from fear to respect to hope. "Never again," Katie said. "That is all we ask. Never again." The words became the motto of the new galactic order. They were carved into monuments on 1,000 worlds. They were taught to children of every species. They were a promise and a warning wrapped together. Humanity had been pushed to the edge of extinction. They had been called animals and primitives and pests. They had watched 3 million of their people burn and been told to accept it. Instead, they had risen up and shattered the power that tried to crush them. But they did not become tyrants. They did not destroy their enemies. They built a better galaxy where such things could never happen again. That was the true victory, not the battles won or the fleets destroyed. The true victory was proving that strength and mercy could exist together. The true victory was showing the galaxy what humanity really was. 50 years had passed since the war, and the galaxy was completely different. The old council was just a memory. The species that had ruled through fear were now just members of a larger community. The hatred and cruelty that had defined galactic civilization for thousands of years had been replaced by something new. Human technology had changed everything. Dr. Megan Torres had shared her discoveries freely, and scientists across the galaxy had built upon them. Diseases that had plagued elder races for millennia were cured. Worlds that had been considered dead were brought to life through terraforming. Ships could travel between stars in hours instead of weeks. For the first time in galactic history, no species lived in fear of extinction. The strong did not prey on the weak. The old did not enslave the young. Everyone worked together because they had seen what happened when they did not. Admiral Jake Morrison had passed away peacefully 15 years after the war. He died, surrounded by his grandchildren, in a small house on Earth, overlooking the ocean. His last words were about the sunrise. He said it reminded him why he had fought so hard. A statue of Morrison stood in the central plaza of the Galactic Union capital. It showed him as he had been on the day of victory. His face was tired but determined. His eyes looked toward the stars. Beneath the statue were carved the words he had spoken during the first attack. "This is not revenge. This is consequence." People from 100 different species visited the statue every day. Some came to pay respect. Some came to remember. Some came simply to understand how a young species from a small world had changed the course of history. But humanity never forgot what had started everything. Every year on the anniversary of the New Haven massacre, every human settlement observed a moment of silence. Ships stopped moving. Factories went quiet. Schools paused their lessons. For 1 minute, the entire species stood still and remembered. During that minute, 3 million names were read aloud. It took thousands of ceremonies happening at the same time to speak every name. Children who had been born long after the war learned the names of people they would never meet. They learned that those people had been real. They had been farmers and teachers and doctors and artists. They had been mothers and fathers and sons and daughters. They had been human beings who deserved to live. Ambassador Daniel Cooper was 87 years old when he gave the memorial address on the 50th anniversary. His hair was white, and his body was frail, but his mind was still sharp. He had spent his entire life working for peace, and now he could finally see the results. He stood before an audience that included thousands of humans and representatives from dozens of alien species. Many of those aliens had once been enemies. Now they came to honor the dead because they understood that the massacre had been wrong. 50 years ago, the galaxy tried to break us, Cooper said. His voice was quiet, but it carried across the silent crowd. They killed 3 million of our people and called it a warning. They demanded that we surrender our freedom and become their slaves. They thought we were too weak and too primitive to resist. He paused and looked out at the faces watching him. Human faces and alien faces, young faces and old faces, all of them waiting to hear what he would say next. We could have become what they feared, Cooper continued. After the war, we had the power to burn the galaxy. We could have destroyed every species that voted against us. We could have built an empire of our own and ruled through the same fear and cruelty that had been used against us. Some people wanted that. Some people said it was what our enemies deserved. He shook his head slowly, but we chose a different path. We chose to build instead of destroy. We chose to forgive instead of hate. We chose to create a galaxy where what happened to New Haven could never happen again. Not because we were weak, not because we were afraid, but because we were strong enough to be better. Cooper's voice grew stronger as he reached the end of his speech. That is our legacy. That is what it means to be human. We do not surrender when we are threatened. We do not become monsters when we are victorious. We rise. We survive. We build something better, and we never forget those we lost along the way. The crowd was silent for a long moment after he finished. Then the applause began. It started with the humans and spread to the aliens. It grew louder and louder until it filled the entire memorial plaza with sound. Cooper smiled and wiped tears from his old eyes. He had waited 50 years to see this moment. Humans and aliens standing together in peace. A galaxy transformed by the choices his species had made. A future that seemed impossible when New Haven burned. On a distant world, a young Valori named Zethkar watched the memorial ceremony through a video screen. Zethkar was the grandchild of Zethnar, the representative who had laughed at humanity so long ago. Zethnar had died in the labor colonies, never understanding what it had done wrong. But Zethkar understood. The young Valori had grown up learning the true history of the Council, learning about the cruelty and arrogance that had nearly destroyed the galaxy. Learning that humanity had every right to hate the Valori, but had chosen mercy instead. Zethkar worked as a doctor now. Healing others was a way of making amends for what an ancestor had done. It was not enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. Across the galaxy, similar stories played out every day. Children of former enemies became friends. Old hatreds faded into history. New generations grew up never knowing the fear that had once defined galactic civilization. Humanity continued to explore and grow. They found new worlds and new wonders. They met new species and welcomed them into the Union. They faced new challenges and overcame them together with their allies. And whenever anyone asked how a species so young had risen so far, the answer was always the same. Someone had tried to break them, and they had refused to stay broken. Someone had tried to destroy them, and they had become stronger. Someone had called them animals, and they had proven themselves to be something far more remarkable. The galaxy had learned an important lesson about the strange emotional creatures from a small blue world orbiting an ordinary yellow star. They looked weak, but they were not. They seemed primitive, but they were not. They appeared easy to defeat, but they were not. They were human. And that meant they should never be pushed too far.